A few months ago, I released a video talking about my gripes with Grand Theft Auto 5, and my views on why it's a weaker entry in the series for me as a speedrunner of the older Grand Theft Auto titles. I mentioned how it wouldn't be the last GTA game I ever talk about in this manner, as even the classics that I speedrun aren't immune to critique. Today, I'm going to show you a different side of a game that many of you watching will swear by, and sing from the rooftops that it is one of the greatest games of all time, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Don't get me wrong, I think this game is good. If I truly hated it, I wouldn't speedrun it every day and put thousands of hours into becoming the best I can be at it. I have many issues with San Andreas though, and not just from a speedrunning perspective. So today, we will be looking at both story and gameplay to truly see if San Andreas is more than just a sight in rose-tinted glasses. Many claim to remember the story of Carl Johnson like it was yesterday. Every cutscene, every phone call, every random line when CJ breaks out into song.
Hey, yo, you dropped the bomb on me.
That's great, and I honestly can't disagree with some of the sections being extremely memorable, even if you're not a GTA fan. A lot of San Andreas memes are at a point where you don't even need to have touched the game in order to laugh at the references. There's no question that this game had a huge impact, but I think we should break it down a little bit. To those who don't know, San Andreas follows Carl Johnson, otherwise known as CJ, a young man who escaped to Liberty City after the death of his little brother. CJ is a member of the Grove Street families, a gang in San Andreas run by his older brother, Sweet. CJ has returned to San Andreas after his mother was killed in a drive-by gone wrong when a rival gang, the Ballers, attempted to kill Sweet. The Grove Street families used to run the streets of San Andreas, but in the last 5 or so years they have lost almost all control of their territory to other gangs and fallen into irrelevancy. Besides Sweet and CJ, there is also their sister Kendall, Ryder, and Big Smoke. These last two I mentioned are especially important for reasons that we'll get into later, so I want you to keep them fresh in your brain as we go along. The main narrative of San Andreas follows Carl as he helps restore the Grove Street families back to their former glory. During CJ's adventures, he will enter 6 major sections of the game. They are as follows: Los Santos, the Badlands, San Fierro, the Desert, Las Venturas, and returning to Los Santos. In each section, I will update you with the lore in case you're not familiar with what's currently happening in the story, and also look at gameplay examples of what the game does well and what it does poorly. If you'd like a visual representation of my overall opinion of the game as it goes through, no worries, I've drawn one for you in paint using my impeccable artistic talents. You're welcome. As you can see, the later sections are where the game really starts to nosedive for me. This is because I believe the second half of this game is completely unfinished, empty, and extremely rushed. We will go more in depth there later, but hopefully that gives you a sort of TLDR for the upcoming sections. With that being said, let's take a look at the first segment, Los Santos. The first segment in the game focuses very much on the Grove Street life. Throughout his time in Los Santos, CJ will look to restore his brother's gang back to their former glory. I'm cautious that it might sound like I'm repeating myself here, but that's very much intentional. As I mentioned earlier, the original premise of San Andreas is entirely based around the gangs in this city, but we will see in time that this is not all the game has to offer. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves though, let's talk about the first mission of San Andreas, Big Smoke. The premise of Big Smoke is quite simple. You attend your mother's funeral just for Big Smoke's car to be destroyed by a group of ballers outside of the cemetery. CJ, Smoke, Ryder, and Sweet must get back to Grove Street. A mission so conceptually simple, yet so horrific in execution. The baller's car is still chasing you in the mission, and they are a huge pain in your ass. At this point, you will very likely have no way to defend yourself since you've just started the game, and you can be killed almost immediately depending on how much mercy the ballers wish to give you. What makes it worse is that Sweet and Ryder, who are necessary for the mission to progress, can get stuck in so many different places and just outright softlock the mission. Relying on AI behavior like this is super dangerous even nowadays, but 2004 AI just means that you have to babysit them if you want the mission to actually work as intended. Rockstar did think of some creative ways to stop players from locking themselves out of progression in certain places, but they didn't do nearly enough for a game that was so huge for its time. In the second mission, which is the eating tutorial, the game will give you $2 to spend on a pizza in the event that you spent all of your money prior. It's a shame that you don't see this more often, especially when the prior games had a ton of failsafes included. Many missions in this game will just completely lock up if a character doesn't make it to their intended destination. Take the mission Burning Desire, for example. You save a girl named Denise from a burning building and take her home. If she gets stuck in this cutscene, it's game over, as the cutscene will never end. GTA 3 and Vice City both had timeout failsafes that would continue a cutscene if it gets stuck, so it's a real shame to see San Andreas not bother with such a seemingly easy fix.
This is my place.
Hey, what's your name?
Denise Robinson. Give me a call sometime. We should go out or something.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, I'll catch you later, CJ.
Speaking of Rockstar's laziness, I think this is the perfect time to talk about the huge issues this game has with copyright. Now, obviously back in the early 2000s, DMCA wasn't nearly as problematic as it is nowadays, so it's not like we should expect Rockstar to tiptoe around it. What, however, I do expect from Rockstar is for them to actually turn the music off when I turn the music off in the settings. There are several times during missions that copyrighted music will play regardless of your audio settings, so the only way to avoid it is by muting the entire game yourself. Of course, the logical people to point the finger at are the greedy music labels who don't understand a thing about how the streaming world works, but I don't think it's too much to ask for a volume slider to actually, mute shit. All the music slider does is turn down the in-game radio, but that's not foolproof either. If you enter a vehicle before a mission is about to pass, it will just blast out the radio that's supposed to be muted anyway. Even if you don't, it will still play a frame or so of the audio before cutting out, and it just sounds horrible. It's not just the sound that's bugged to all hell though. Have you ever been in a gunfight in San Andreas and just been completely destroyed before you could even react? You might have fallen victim to a bug that plagues the entire game and was never fixed. In San Andreas, there are two different accuracy levels for enemies to use. The first is when you are on foot or using a bike of some kind, and the second is when you're in a car. When you're in a car, the enemies are scripted to be much more accurate to make up for the advantage of you being in a car. Let's call the first accuracy value 0, and the second value 1 when they are much more accurate. The intended behavior is that the accuracy will turn to 1 when you enter a car, and reset back to 0 when you exit. This doesn't happen though, and the accuracy just sticks at 1. This means that if you take a car to a gunfight and then get out to shoot at your enemies, they will just destroy you, as they will be laser accurate and never miss. The only way to reset the value is to get on a bike or despawn the car that you arrived in somehow. This bug completely breaks many missions in the game, especially later on when the enemies have much deadlier weapons and will kill you instantly if you try and fight them in this bug state. I'm sure a lot of you were expecting me at some point to cover Wrong Sides of the Tracks, otherwise known as the most beaten dead horse on the planet. Follow the damn train, CJ, lol, LMAO. This mission is notorious for being extremely hard, and those who think so aren't necessarily wrong. However, I do think it's important to actually look at why this mission is so bad, rather than just the idea of never being able to complete it as a kid. To those who aren't familiar with the mission, CJ and Big Smoke have to chase a train that has a number of gang members on the top. You need to drive alongside while Smoke deals with them. But as we've talked about before, relying on AI is very dangerous. Smoke's aim is absolutely horrendous, and it takes him a really long time to kill everyone. You chase the train down some tracks, through a tunnel, and into the countryside. The countryside section is extremely important, because at this exact point of the mission, if Smoke hasn't done a significant amount of damage to the group, it's already over. It's only really a third of the way into the chase, but you've already lost. The countryside segment takes you up and over onto dirt paths, and if you take these logical paths, Smoke will never be in the right position to do any more damage. There is a clear logical path to take, but if you take it, you will lose. At the end of the dirt paths is a way back onto the tracks, but assuming you've been doing what the mission clearly wants and going alongside the train, you will get blocked off by the train going into the tunnel and also not be able to do any damage. Here's a map of the route you take during the mission, and all the sections that are completely useless. This is ultimately why the mission is so fundamentally flawed, because you are destined to fail if you follow what the game says to do. At the end of Los Santos, there is a huge plot twist where Kendall's boyfriend, Cesar Villalpando, shows you Ryder and Big Smoke working alongside the Ballers and the corrupt police unit Crash. And even see them with the Green Saber, which was the car the Ballers used to kill CJ's mother. This is where it all comes tumbling down for Grove Street. Ryder and Smoke are becoming drug overlords after betraying their brother. Sweet gets arrested, and CJ is exiled from Los Santos to the Badlands. The plot of the Badlands is quite simple. The officers behind Crash, mainly Tenpenny and Pulaski, warn CJ to stay away from Los Santos and stay away from Big Smoke if he wants Sweet to remain unharmed in prison. He starts doing dirty work for Crash, while also wanting to make some of his own money. He is introduced to Caesar's cousin Catalina, and they commit some small-time robberies together and enter a brief and very abusive relationship.
Look, baby, I really need that paper. Oh my God! What in hell's name is that?
This, you fucking prick? This is a rack. I'm gonna
No,
torture
baby,
your sorry
no,
ass.
Please, no.
You never write to me. You don't call. You treat me like a fucking whore. Like one of your whores.
No, baby, please. I ain't into that shit.
I'm gonna fuck.
These missions with Catalina can be done in any order, with different dialogue occurring depending on which missions you have and have not completed. This is really nice, but it leads to a huge issue as well. Here's the mission order for this segment of the game. It looks a bit complicated, but we can break it down. So, first date is the time where you meet Catalina, and from here on, you have the 4 robberies you complete with her. There's a mission where you steal a Combine Harvester as part of the main plot, and a cutscene mission where you meet up with Caesar and Kendall. That's all there is to the progression of Badlands, but the final section has 2 races that we're going to discuss in a second. It's worth pointing out that every single Catalina robbery ends at her safe house, and each time you do a new robbery after the first one, you have to go back to the same safe house to start the next one. This means that logically, most casual players are going to do all of Catalina's missions at once, since you just start the next mission right after finishing the last, even though technically you unlock the first race after the second robbery. This means that you will complete these races back to back right at the end. And there's a huge issue here. The races are exactly the same. The second one is just the same track, but in reverse. There is no real excuse for just recycling the same mission at any point in the game, but it makes it so much worse when you are just going to do the same mission twice in a row for no reason. It wouldn't be so bad if the race was at all competitive, but GTA has a tendency for racing AI to be so horrible that any race just becomes a checkpoint collectathon anyway. This means that a decent segment of the game is completely ruined by 5 minutes of just collecting checkpoints. A real shame. Let's do a quick lore sitrep for a second. So, you've robbed some shit with Catalina, and you've done a bit of dirty work for Crash. Next up is San Fierro, where we will tie up a few loose ends from back home in absolutely the worst way possible towards the end of this segment. But first, let's start from the top. After some more crash-related nonsense, we team up with Caesar in easily one of the worst missions in the game, Photo Opportunity. It's actually quite a big mission in terms of the game's lore, as you head to a meetup where you take pictures of Ryder and a bunch of other blokes who are involved in the drugs business. Doesn't sound too bad, right? Well, let's take a look at the mission mechanically. You drive halfway across the map to meet Caesar, then you drive halfway across the map to get to the location, take a few pictures, then get abandoned in the middle of nowhere, so you have to drive halfway across the map to get back to society. This means that you are spending 90% of your time here just driving and not doing anything, just holding W in silence. There's no gameplay here, it's not at all compelling, and it's just a complete chore. It's a huge slap in the face that of course Caesar's car is the single worst vehicle in the entire game, as it has input delay for some insane reason, so it's completely impossible to drive effectively even in ideal conditions.
Fool!
I don't mind if the gameplay suffers a little bit for narrative reasons. Sometimes you've got to focus on telling a story, especially with a narrative so large. But there is no reason for this gameplay to exist at all. The game doesn't need padding, it's long enough as it is. A chain of missions you complete is for Woozy Moo, who's the leader of a triad group whom Carl meets funnily enough during the shitty races we talked about in the last section. One of the missions requires 2 lung capacity upgrades in order to start the mission, so you'll need to swim underwater and do a bit of breath training to continue. I really don't like the way this is done, as it completely ruins the flow of the game. It's pretty unlikely that players will have done much underwater exploration, since there isn't much incentive for it besides a few collectibles. This means that in most playthroughs, players will get walled by this mission just to have to go and AFK in the water for a few minutes and then come back. What's the point? It's just not compelling. The mission itself is fine, but this obstacle to start the mission just does not work. Towards the end of San Fierro, you will experience a showdown against Ryder, and you might remember it being quite underwhelming. You confront Ryder with Caesar after killing one of the guys you photographed earlier, and chase him in a boat. You shoot him, he dies, that's it. There's no cutscene, there's no real dialogue besides a few recycled lines from earlier in the game. He was at the head of the huge betrayal right at the start, and now he's treated just like any other NPC. What on earth happened? Well, to answer this, we need to take a deeper look behind the scenes when it comes to Rockstar and their talent, especially voice actors. Rockstar has had a ton of run-ins with talent across all their games, from using Michael Washington's likeness without permission nor payment, to burning bridges with pretty much every single protagonist to a point where none of them wish to return and make any more games with Rockstar. Ray Liotta, Burt Reynolds, Chuck D, Michael Hollick, and Young Melee have all been very vocal about issues when it came to their voice acting roles in the Grand Theft Auto universe. Unfortunately, when it comes to Ryder's voice actor MC8, there doesn't seem to be too much direct information regarding what happened, besides a supposed Twitter DM where he simply said what he did was all Rockstar wanted him to do. Now, this doesn't really explain much, as why would they set up this huge betrayal and then show Ryder the door without a proper send-off? Regardless of what happened though, it's not really a good look for the game. Many people talk about the awesome narrative, Grove Street for life, etc., but this is all that comes of it. Now reaching the end of the San Fierro portion, Carl kills the rest of the geeks that he and Caesar spotted during Photo Opportunity. Here, it's especially worth pointing out the death of Mike Torino, where the game just outright spoils the next plot twist for anyone who's paying attention. Torino can't have possibly survived that fireball. I wonder what this could possibly mean.
Well, imagine my shock. Well, imagine my shock. Imagine my shock. Imagine my shock. Well, imagine my shock.
Well, imagine my shock. Carl gets an ominous phone call from a mystery man with a voice changer telling him to come up north and meet him at a nearby ranch as he has information regarding Sweet. To be fair to the lads at Rockstar, this section does have quite a funny line that gets me every time.
Carl, darling, welcome.
So fucking welcome, man. What you know about my family?
Now first we need to see what you're made of.
What it look like I'm made of? Pudding?
Now, let's take a look at what actually happens in this segment. First off, you're given a monster truck and are told to take it for a spin. Why, you ask? Well, to collect these arbitrary checkpoints that have no ties to the narrative, of course. This mission in reality is just an introduction to the new area of the map, and a similar mission was done when you first entered San Fierro. Here's the key difference. The San Fierro mission actually tries to tie into the narrative. You meet new characters, you learn about their personalities. This mission has you doing none of that, and to make it much worse, there's absolutely fuck all to discover in the desert. It's a fucking desert, what did you expect? You end up just driving in circles for 5 minutes. Truly compelling stuff. This is where the next big surprise happens. Drumroll, please.
Hey, Carl.
Hey, what the fuck, man? Hey, Torino, I told you my bad, man. What the hell can I say? I screwed you over.
Calm down, kid.
Just go ahead and kill me then.
Calm down.
Man, you ain't nothing but a fucking yayo dealer anyway, Torino.
Shut up and sit down.
It turns out Torino actually did survive that fireball. No way. He actually works for a government agency and appears to have direct control over Sweet's safety in prison. Well, on the bright side, at least now Carl has something to do. A few tasks later, and Torino wants Carl to get a pilot's license. He must buy the local abandoned airstrip and get his pilot's license from there. What I find the funniest about this segment is that after completing the third test, the game says, "Hey, congrats, you now have a pilot's license." Does this mean you can continue? No, you need to complete all of the tests to prove to Torino that you actually know how to fly. Does this mean that all pilots in San Andreas actually have no idea how to fly the planes? Well, that would make sense, because there are an awful lot of plane crashes in this game.
Good.
Fucking hell, well done.
Goes so
First
high
time.
up. Yeah. That was good.
Yeah,
I can see why you don't
everything
do
worked out.
that.
Yeah.
Just double the enemies and everything.
If you
Oh, there's a plane for you, Josh.
Oh yeah, look.
plane crash.
Oh, okay.
Think. Whoa! Did you see that? Did you fucking see that?
Goodness me. Well, maybe it's a well thought out Nah, who am I kidding? It's just bad coding. Now that Carl has his fully upgraded pilot's license, he can stay at the airstrip for a few missions or venture into Las Venturas. Admittedly, I think this is the coolest area of the game. Huge casinos, fast cars everywhere you look. It's a spectacle for sure. There's a lot of plot points here that tie in quite nicely. Carl saves Mad Dog's life and gets him into rehab, and even ends up getting partial revenge on Crash by killing Pulaski after Tenpenny attempts to betray Carl once more.
Now, huh?
Yeah, well, them's the brakes, fuck.
Any last requests?
Yeah. Can I fuck your sister?
You an asshole to the end. Punk motherfucker.
Honestly, not too bad, but it's not all sunshines and rainbows in Vegas.
What the fuck is wrong with you people?
The entire narrative of Las Venturas is that Carl is helping Woozy set up a casino. It's not an easy task, as the town is run by the mafia, so Carl does a number of tasks that all build up to the finale of robbing the rival casino. There's just one problem. The heist chain of missions is completely optional. This means that if you are simply following the story, Carl does all of this prep work for nothing. There's no payoff, and it just ends up being really dumb. Speaking of really dumb, have a listen to this piece of dialogue.
Hey, Carl, how'd it go?
Tell Woozy we'll be getting no more trouble with them counterfeit chips.
Jesus Christ. For some bizarre reason, it's towards the end of Las Venturas that Rockstar decided to get a real rock on for flying around the map. There are several missions such as Freefall and St. Mark's Bistro that force Carl to fly in a straight line for minutes before even getting to the first objective, before having to fly all the way back again. For those types of missions, I think the flying is completely unnecessary, but at the very least they can be salvaged if the actual gameplay is good enough. Freefall especially does not meet this criteria, as you are instead just forced into turret mode in order to left click a few guys who are absolutely no threat to you. You can't even headshot these guys, and there's even a joke of a boss at the end who literally spawns in your crosshair, so you don't even have to move to stunlock him. Just listen to the dialogue here.
I ain't going down without a fight.
This has to be satire, right? St. Mark's Bistro isn't much better, but at least you actually need to move your mouse in order to complete it. Now Carl is a casino-running mastermind, known for robbing the rival casino which he didn't actually end up robbing. It's about time we head back to where it all began. Remember this graph I showed you at the start of the video? Well, as you can see, here is where we hit rock bottom. At least it can't get any worse. Here's a tree of the missions in this segment. As you can see, there isn't really a lot. If there's only 8 missions, how bad can it possibly be? Well, this tree is quite misleading compared to what you actually have to do to complete the game. But we need to back up a little bit. Back during the first time Carl was in Los Santos, we were introduced to gang territories. During the mission Doberman, you are tasked with taking over Glen Park, and this mission is an introduction to the gang territory mechanic. It's pretty simple. Zones on the map are colored green for Grove Street, purple for the Ballers, and yellow for the Vagos, depending on who is controlling that part of town. In order to take a territory for the Grove, Carl simply needs to go inside that area, kill 3 guys to start the takeover, and then kill 3 waves of enemies that will spawn. Once he's done that, the place will turn green and you've taken over that territory. Sounds harmless, right? Well, not quite. What if I told you that half of this entire segment was just poorly disguised gang territories? Let's take a look at some missions. Homecoming has you head to the local precinct and pick up Sweet, who was just released from prison. You head back to Grove Street and see it's full of dope dealers and ballers. Doesn't sound too bad on paper, but this mission is coded exactly like a gang territory. 3 ballers to start the war, 3 waves to take it back. Let's take a look at the next mission, Beat Down on B-Dup. Oh look, it's just another gang territory. How about the next mission, Grow for Life? Oh fuck off, Rockstar. None of the missions are particularly good here. Cutthroat Business has you chase OG Loke in a vortex and a go-kart around the city, maybe in order to tie up this loose end and finally take him out. But nope, it's in the final cutscene you just mock him a little and that's it. 0 payoff.
Hey, Lo, go get us some lunch. You get lunch.
Riot shouldn't even be a mission. You drive to Grove Street, that's it.
12 seconds later.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
Like, they have to be joking, right? Not only should this mission not exist, but it introduces one of the worst mechanics in the entire game. During Riot, Officer Tenpenny is tried for his crimes, but ultimately gets away with everything. The entire city goes ballistic, and riots begin in the streets. Pedestrians can be seen fighting, robbing TVs, you name it. Seems to fit the narrative, what's the issue? Well, I suppose the testers forgot to actually play the game that they were supposed to be playing, because cars and bikes will just randomly set on fire and explode as you approach them, meaning it's basically a coin flip whether you just get insta-killed or not as you're trying to complete the last few missions.
I didn't have combat or normal shotgun in the inventory.
It's a complete joke, and yet it gets worse. When you've completed all of the missions up until the finale, you will see that you are unable to enter the marker to continue until you have taken over more territories around Los Santos. You have just spent almost half of your time here doing the same boring minigame over and over, a minimum of 5 times already, well, you'll be elated to know that in order to unlock the final mission, you have to take over 35% of all territories in Los Santos, which comes to 19 total. 19! Even if you somehow have done more of this brain-numbing shite than what is the bare minimum, you are still looking at a minimum of dozen more times that you have to do this shit. What were they thinking? It's not interesting, it's not engaging, and it just kills the entire flow of building towards the grand finale. It's tragic. After finally stomaching all of that, the finale isn't actually too bad. Carl takes out Smoke and ends up back at the Grove with Tenpenny groveling before his feet before succumbing to his injuries. It's just so unfortunate that those sweet moments are constantly tainted by poor writing and horrible design choices. There's no doubt that San Andreas was the pinnacle of ambition for a 3D open world, and it does a lot of things exceptionally. However, I simply cannot agree that it is perfect or Game of the Decade contention, and I hope that what we have discussed today shines a light on the sometimes grisly appearance many fans choose to ignore. We all have our favorites, and I cannot take that away from you. Maybe one day I'll even talk about the shortcomings of my favorite GTA title. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.